She was a ghost at the feast, a whisper of a woman in a world determined to shout. In a sea of designer gowns shimmering like captured galaxies and makeup applied with the precision of high art, she was an anomaly. A simple linen dress in pale sage, faded ballet flats that had known softer, kinder floors, and auburn hair loosely tied. It was enough to make Eva Quinn the joke of the evening. She stood on the marble terrace of the Belvoir estate, a silent testament to a life lived away from the blinding glare of this opulent world, clutching an invitation that felt more like a summons than a welcome. The estate glittered under a late September sky, a sprawling monument to new money and stolen dreams. This was Clara's wedding, a spectacle branded as a celebration of empowered womanhood, but, in reality, a coronation. Chandeliers, heavy with crystal tiers, hung from silk-draped pergolas, casting diamond-shaped light across tables set with gold-rimmed glasses. Orchids, in every shade of white and blush, spilled from every conceivable surface, their cloying scent mingling with the crisp evening air and the expensive perfume of global influencers, CEOs, and minor royalty. They moved like constellations in their bespoke tuxedos and couture armor, their laughter a carefully orchestrated symphony of wealth. Before we go further, if this hits you, any of you watching who've ever been looked down on, judged for how you look, or where you come from, take a second, grab your phone, hit that like button, drop a comment below, and subscribe to the channel. Above, drones hummed like metallic insects, their lenses capturing every curated moment for the millions watching the live stream. This was not merely a wedding, it was a branding event, and Clara, the self-proclaimed queen of the beauty empire Alice, was its radiant, triumphant center. Eva felt a familiar pang, a dull ache that resided deep in her bones. She had built Alice from nothing. It was her dorm room dream, born from late nights, spent hunched over beakers, mixing formulas while Clara, her then roommate and best friend, had laughed at what she called her nerdy obsession. Eva had been the brain, the heart, the soul of the company, creating clean beauty products that had revolutionized an industry. She had poured her very essence into its foundation. A hostess in a sequined sheath, her body as rigid as her smile, glided towards Eva. Her eyes performed a swift, brutal calculus, taking in the linen dress and the makeup-free face, and arrived at a simple, scornful conclusion. "Catering staff used the side entrance," she said, her voice sharp and dismissive. She pointed a perfectly manicured finger towards a gravel path where service vans were parked like patient beasts of burden. Eva's lips curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. Her voice, when it came, was soft but clear, a gentle stream against the crashing waves of the party. "I'm a guest, Eva Quinn." She offered the cream-colored envelope, its elegant script a smug reminder of Clara's victory. The hostess hesitated, her professional veneer cracking for a fraction of a second. She scanned the invitation with a handheld device. A frown creased her brow. "This checks out," she conceded, her tone laced with suspicion. "But wait here." She backed away, muttering into her headset, leaving Eva marooned in a sea of curious, predatory stares. The whispers started then, slicing through the melody of the string quartet. A woman in a sapphire gown, her ears dripping with emeralds, leaned towards her companion. "Is that linen?" she said, her voice carrying with the deliberate force of a thrown stone. Did she wander in from a craft fair? Her friend, a tech heiress named Laya Hart, whose diamond bracelet flashed with cruel light, let out a high-pitched laugh. "I bet she's here for the open bar. Some people have no shame." A man in a velvet tuxedo, whose cufflinks were worth more than the car Eva drove, joined the chorus. "No makeup. That's a bold move for a gold digger." Their chuckles rippled through the nearby guests, drawing more eyes, more judgment. Eva stood still, her hands clasped around the invitation. She felt their gazes like sharp pins, but they couldn't pierce the quiet armor she had forged over years of silence and betrayal. She had faced the sterile white walls of hospital rooms, the chilling betrayal of a boardroom coup, and the long, dark nights wondering if she would ever rebuild a life from the wreckage. This was just noise. The meaningless chatter of people who valued the price of everything and the value of nothing. She took a single, deliberate step forward, towards the main pavilion, her purpose clear in her mind, and that was when she saw her, Clara. a vision in a crystal-encrusted gown that shimmered like frost on a winter morning, diamonds sparkling at her throat. She spotted Eva across the terrace, and for a fleeting moment her mask of bridal bliss faltered. Then it was back in place, wider and brighter than before, a smile that never reached her cold, calculating eyes. The serpent in the garden had appeared, ready to play her part. Clara moved towards Eva with the practiced grace of a performer, who knows every eye is upon her. Her gown, a masterpiece of silk and Swarovski crystals, swept across the marble, leaving a trail of whispers in its wake. She was the sun around which this entire universe revolved, and she had just spotted a speck of dust she was eager to extinguish. Eva, Clara's voice was syrupy sweet, but loud enough for the nearest tables to hear, a calculated performance for her audience. "Oh, you came. I was so surprised to see your RSVP." Eva remained silent, her hazel eyes steady. She knew this game. Clara thrived on public displays of power, on demonstrating her dominance by feigning kindness to those she had crushed. "Don't worry," Clara continued, her voice dripping with mock magnanimity. "You're still welcome to enjoy this wedding, even if you're no longer the founder of Alice." The words landed like a physical slap. A ripple of shocked gasps, followed by delighted, cruel laughter, spread through the crowd. Phones, already poised to capture the bride, now angled to capture the humiliation. Eva could see the small red lights of recording devices, turning her private pain into public entertainment. Clara tilted her head, her smile sharpening into a weapon. "I mean, it's been years, hasn't it? You've moved on." She gestured vaguely at Eva's simple dress, her tone a masterclass in pity, found a quieter life. The implication was clear. Look at her. Look at what she has become, while I have soared. Eva's mind flashed back to the source of that quieter life. It wasn't a choice she had made, but a life that had been forced upon her. She remembered the birth of her daughter, Lily, the joy so quickly overshadowed by postpartum complications that had left her bedridden for months. She remembered the sterile smell of the hospital, the endless days of weakness and fear. And she remembered the phone calls, the increasingly vague emails from Clara, who was supposed to be managing Alice in her absence. Then came the boardroom meeting she was too ill to attend. Clara, backed by their inner circle chemists Eva had mentored, marketing gurus whose careers she had launched had systematically erased her. They used her medical leave as an excuse, framing it as an inability to lead. They claimed her formulas, rewrote the company's origin story to star Clara as the sole visionary, and ousted her with a swift, brutal coup. She was left with nothing but a broken heart, a newborn baby, and the bitter taste of betrayal. Clara had not just stolen her company, she had stolen her past, her present, and her future. Eva had retreated. She chose to focus on Lily, on rebuilding her health and her spirit away from the world that had so thoroughly broken her. While Clara climbed higher and higher on the ladder of her stolen legacy, Eva was learning to walk again, both literally and figuratively. Now, standing on this terrace, Eva's silence was her shield and her sword. It seemed to unsettle Clara, who needed a reaction, tears, anger, anything to validate her victory. Getting none, she laughed again, a sound that was louder and more brittle this time. "Come on, everyone, let's be kind," Clara announced, waving a dismissive hand as if shooing away a stray animal. "Eva's an old acquaintance. Let her enjoy the view." With a final, triumphant glance, Clara turned and swept away, disappearing back into the adoring crowd. Her parting shot hung in the air, thick and poisonous. "Old acquaintance?" Liahart snorted to her companion, loud enough for Eva to hear, more like ancient history. The master of ceremonies, a slick man named Trevor Kane with a shark's grin and eyes that held no warmth, took to the stage. His microphone gleamed under the lights. "All right, let's get our wonderful guests seated for the main event," he boomed, his voice echoing across the lawn. His eyes scanned the crowd, a predator seeking its next meal. They landed on Eva. He paused, his grin widening with malicious opportunity. "Oh, and it seems we have a special spot for our more unique attendees," he announced, a cruel chuckle in his voice. The spotlight operator, following his cue, swung a harsh beam of light directly onto Eva, pinning her in place. She didn't flinch, didn't even blink. He gestured dramatically toward a small, isolated table near the catering station, tucked behind a service counter piled high with dirty trays and empty glasses. Right there, miss. A perfect view for you. The crowd erupted in a wave of cruel laughter. It echoed off the marble, a sound that would have shattered a lesser person. A waiter, rushing past and mistaking the spotlight's target for a slacking employee, thrust a heavy tray of champagne flutes into her hands. "Hurry up, table 7 is waiting," he snapped, before doing a double take at her dress. He blinked, confused, as she gently but firmly declined the tray, her voice calm and even. "I'm not serving tonight," she said, her quiet dignity a stark contrast to the surrounding chaos. The noise of the crowd, the sting of the spotlight, the weight of their scorn, none of it could touch the core of resolve that had brought her here tonight. She was not here to be a guest. She was here to be a reckoning. Eva walked to the designated table, each step measured and deliberate. The harsh glare of the spotlight followed her like a hunter tracking its prey. She ignored the stares, the pointing fingers, and the phones held aloft to capture her walk of shame. She sat, her back perfectly straight, and placed the cream-colored invitation on the table beside her, a solitary piece of evidence in a trial where she had already been judged and sentenced. The other guests at the table, a few awkward cousins of the groom and some low-tier plus-ones who knew they were insignificant, pointedly avoided her gaze, their discomfort a palpable thing. They hunched over their plates, suddenly fascinated by the pattern on their china. To be seated with the evening's entertainment was to be tainted by her failure. Nearby, a group of influencers in neon gowns, their faces illuminated by the glow of their own phones, were filming a story. Their voices were loud and sharp. "She's giving major thrift store vibes," one said, zooming her camera in on Eva's faded ballet flats. Her followers, thousands of them, would see this. They would laugh. "Does she know this is streaming to millions?" Another added, her lips glossy and twisted into a sneer. "This is just sad. Bet she's here to beg Clara for a job." The live stream comments, which were being projected onto a large screen near the bar for guests to admire, flooded in with vicious speed. "Loser alert. Oh my God, Clara is so nice to even let her in. Why is she even here? So embarrassing." The humiliation, however, was far from over. As Eva sat in her forced isolation, a catering manager in a crisp suit, his face red with irritation, stormed over to her table. He had likely been alerted by the hostess or the MC that a problem needed handling. "You're in the wrong spot," he barked, his voice loud enough for the surrounding tables to turn and watch with glee. "Staff doesn't sit with guests. Get up and move, now." Before Eva could respond, he grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into her skin. He pulled her up so forcefully that her chair scraped loudly against the marble, drawing a fresh wave of attention. The sound was like a scream in the otherwise orchestrated elegance of the evening. "Don't play dumb with me," he hissed, mistaking her silent composure for defiance. He began to drag her towards the service exit. A few guests actually clapped. One man shouted, "Yeah, send her to the kitchens to wash dishes." A woman, laughing hysterically, crumpled her linen napkin and tossed it at Eva. It landed at her feet. "Start cleaning, honey," she shrieked. The drone overhead, ever watchful, zoomed in, broadcasting Eva's stumble to the world. For millions of viewers, this was high drama. The pathetic, forgotten founder being physically removed from the glorious wedding of her successor. Eva steadied herself, gently but firmly pulling her arm from the manager's grasp. Her invitation, her proof of belonging, slipped slightly from her other hand, but her face held no fear, no anger, no shame. It held only a quiet, unyielding resolve that seemed to momentarily shame their frenzy into a confused silence. Her calm was an accusation. It suggested they were the ones who were out of control, not her. The manager, taken aback by her lack of a hysterical reaction, faltered. "Well, go on," he stammered, his authority deflating. Eva simply looked at him, then at the jeering faces around her. She didn't retreat to the kitchens. Instead, she walked back to the same table, retrieved her chair, and sat down again. The act was so simple, so defiant, that a hush fell over the immediate area. She had refused to be erased. The cruelty, however, only grew bolder, fueled by champagne and Clara's tacit permission. A man with a flushed face and a lopsided bow tie leaned over her table, his breath sour with alcohol. "Hey, maid," he slurred. "My glass is empty. Grab me a drink." His friends roared with laughter. One of them, a hedge fund bro named Derek, theatrically tossed an olive from his martini. It rolled across the tablecloth, and came to rest in Ava's lap, leaving a small, dark stain on the pale sage linen. "Oops, my hand slipped," Derek called out, winking to his friends. "Clean that up, will you?" A woman in an absurd feathered headpiece flicked her own napkin at Eva. "You're ruining the aesthetic, sweetheart," she said, her voice dripping with scorn. "Maybe you should stick to the kitchen where you belong." Phones flashed, capturing the olive stain, the discarded napkins at her feet. Her dress, once a symbol of her quiet dignity, was now marked and marred by their collective sport. The drones captured it all. Memes were already spreading online. Alyssa's forgotten founder, now a waitress. Eva's fingers tightened on the edge of her invitation, the paper crinkling under the pressure. But her face remained a mask of serenity. She looked past them all, her gaze fixed on the main stage, where Clara was preparing to give her speech. Their childish jabs seemed desperate, their power illusory. They thought they were winning, but they didn't understand the game they were playing. They were pawns in a story much larger than they could comprehend, and its final chapter was about to be written. Trevor Kane, the MC, returned to the microphone, his grin sharper and more predatory than before. He had tasted blood, and he wanted more. The crowd's enthusiastic cruelty had energized him. "And now, folks," he began, his voice booming across the estate, "before our beautiful bride graces us with her words, let's give another big shout-out to our most unexpected guest." The spotlight slammed back onto Eva, pinning her like a bug to a board. It was so bright, it was blinding, erasing the jeering faces and leaving her alone in a bubble of harsh white light. "Who invited the vintage shop mannequin?" Trevor crowed, pausing for the expected roar of laughter. It came, on cue, a wave of sound that felt like a physical blow. "Applause, folks! Let's hear it for her." The applause was mocking, a blade of noise. He leaned into the mic, his eyes glinting as he singled her out again. "You know, we've got a real underdog story here," he continued, his voice dripping with condescending sarcasm. "Miss Thrift Shop here thinks she's a guest, but let's be real, she's probably here for the leftovers." The crowd howled. This was better than any planned entertainment. A man at a nearby table, emboldened by the spectacle, threw a bread roll. It arced through the air and hit Eva on the shoulder, crumbling on impact. She slowly, deliberately brushed the crumbs from her dress. "Give her a goodie bag and boot her out," someone shouted from the back. The live stream numbers surged, the comment section a waterfall of viciousness. Total flop. Clara owns her. This is so satisfying to watch. Number Clara's triumph. Trevor Kane wasn't finished. "I bet she's got a sob story all ready for us." "Go on, Eva," he taunted, speaking her name for the first time, making it an insult. "Cry for us. Tell us how hard your life island." Eva sat perfectly still. The light was harsh on her face, but her eyes didn't waver. They were locked on one person and one person only. Clara, who was watching from the stage, a smug, satisfied smirk on her face. She was basking in this, soaking in the public destruction of the woman whose life she had stolen. This was the final nail in the coffin, the ultimate proof that she, Clara, was the victor. Finally, Clara glided to the microphone, taking it from Trevor's hand. The crowd fell into a worshipful silence. "Thank you all for celebrating with me," she began, her voice as smooth as velvet. Her gown caught the light, making her appear ethereal, untouchable. "This wedding isn't just about love. It's about my journey, the journey of Alice." She paused for dramatic effect. "Alice was my vision, my sweat, my triumph. I built it from nothing but a dream and the will to succeed. And tonight, I stand here as proof that a woman can have it all." The crowd cheered wildly, their claps echoing into the night. As the applause died down, Clara's eyes flicked to Eva, a glint of pure victory in them. "Of course, not every journey ends in success," she continued, her tone becoming pointed, aimed like an arrow at Eva's table. "Some people start strong, but they fade away. They lack the resilience to stay in the game." She paused her speech again, her eyes locking on Eva with a predator's glee. "Oh, but let's not forget our roots," she said, her voice now a caricature of warmth. "Eva, my old friend, you taught me so much. You taught me the valuable lesson of knowing when to step aside." The crowd erupted. This was the kill shot they had all been waiting for. Clara gestured grandly towards Eva's table, and the spotlight, if possible, grew even more intense. highlighting the olive stain and the breadcrumbs on her simple dress. "Look at her," Clara purred into the microphone. "Still so simple." Gasps and giggles rippled through the guests. A man shouted, "Back to the basement, Eva!" Clara leaned closer to the mic, her final pronouncement delivered like a judge's sentence. Some people just don't belong in the spotlight. Eva sat unmoved, her hazel eyes steady, her profound calm a stark contrast to their collective venom. Her silence was a mirror, reflecting their ugliness back at them, though they were too blind to see it. Her gaze didn't falter. It was louder, more powerful than any of Clara's empty words. The insults, the food, the public, shaming it all washed over her. She had endured. She had waited. And the time was now. Then, a low rumble broke the air, a sound like distant thunder that did not belong in the clear September sky. It started faintly, then grew steadily louder, a deep, percussive thrumming that vibrated through the marble floor. Heads turned. Glasses paused, mid-sip. The string quartet faltered, their bows hovering over their strings. The sound wasn't in the sky, it was coming from the sky, and it was getting closer. The rumble grew into a deafening roar, the rhythmic whump 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 of helicopter blades slicing through the carefully curated atmosphere of the wedding. All heads turned towards the source, a sleek, black helicopter, looking like a predatory dragonfly against the dusky sky, was descending with controlled power onto a nearby lawn. It landed with a final gust of wind that kicked up orchid petals and dust, sending tablecloths flapping and champagne glasses trembling. The crowd murmured, a collective gasp of confusion and awe. The drones, which had been so focused on Eva's humiliation, pivoted in unison to capture this new, unexpected spectacle. The live stream viewership, already in the millions, spiked dramatically. Who was this? What was happening? A door slid open, and a man stepped out. He was dressed in a tuxedo so sharp it could have been cut from obsidian. His presence was immediate and absolute, a sudden drop in atmospheric pressure that commanded the attention of every person on the estate. This was not a guest. This was an event. Asher Dorian. The name was whispered in fearful, reverent tones in the highest echelons of global finance, a name synonymous with ruthless acquisitions and untouchable power. He was a reclusive billionaire, a master of global mergers, a man whose picture rarely appeared in the press. His dark hair was swept back from a face that was all sharp angles and quiet intensity. His gray eyes, cold as a winter sea, scanned the crowd with a predator's focus, dismissing them all as irrelevant. He moved past the stunned guests without a word, their gasps trailing him like shadows. He ignored the bridal dais, ignored the speechless, Clara still clutching her microphone, ignored the entire glittering spectacle. His steps were long and deliberate, eating up the distance across the terrace. There was only one person in this entire, crowded estate that he saw. His eyes found Eva, and in that instant, the world seemed to hold its breath. She stood up, her stained dress catching the light of the chandeliers. There was no surprise on her face, only a quiet certainty. She walked to meet him, her ballet flats making no sound on the stone. He took her hand, his touch steady, familiar, a silent communication that spoke volumes more than any word. The crowd froze. Laughter choked in throats. Clara's microphone faltered, her victory speech trailing off into a pathetic squeak. Her face, beneath the delicate veil, had gone deathly pale. Trevor Kane's shark-like grin vanished, his hands fumbling with the mic stand as if it had suddenly become electrified. The main drone, the one broadcasting to the world, zoomed in with startling clarity, capturing the image that would shatter the narrative. Asher Dorian's strong hand holding Eva Quinn's, and on her left hand, the plain silver ring that everyone had overlooked, a simple band that now glinted like a vow forged in steel. Asher turned his gaze, for the first time, to the stage. He looked directly at Trevor Kane, and the slick MC physically recoiled as if struck. Asher's voice was low, yet it carried across the entire terrace, cutting through the stunned silence with effortless authority. "My apologies for the interruption," he said, the words polite but laced with iron. "I have a few announcements to make regarding the company the bride was so proudly discussing." He paused, letting the weight of his presence settle over them. His gaze swept the crowd, and under his scrutiny, CEOs and heiresses shrank in their seats. "Alyssa," Asher stated, his voice devoid of emotion, "was fully acquired this morning. in a deal finalized at 9 a.m. All shares, every patent, every last formula. A wave of frantic murmuring rippled through the estate. Guests were already pulling out their phones, frantically checking financial news feeds. The live stream comment section exploded into a frenzy of pure chaos. What, Dorian? This can't be real. Asher held up a hand, and the crowd fell silent once more. He turned his head slightly, his gaze softening for just a fraction of a second as he looked down at Eva. A hint of a smile touched his lips. And the new majority shareholder, he continued, his voice ringing with finality, the new legal representative and controlling party of Alyss. He looked back at the stunned faces of Clara, Trevor Kane, and the entire wedding party. Is my wife, Eva Quinn Dorian. A collective gasp, sharp and ragged, tore through the estate. Phones dropped from nerveless fingers. Live streams, broadcasting to a now global audience, were flooded with comments of disbelief and shock. Wife? Eva's back. Holy S. This is the greatest plot twist ever. Asterisk. Eva stepped forward, letting go of Asher's hand. Her flats were silent on the marble as she walked towards the stage, her stained dress no longer a mark of shame, but a badge of honor, a testament to the cruelty she had endured and overcome. Clara stumbled back as Eva approached, her extravagant gown catching on the mic stand. Suddenly, her diamonds looked dull, her makeup garish, her entire persona a cheap imitation next to the quiet, radiant power of the woman she had tried to destroy. The queen was a fraud, and the true monarch had just arrived to reclaim her throne. Eva ascended the few steps to the stage, moving with an unhurried grace that captivated the now silent crowd. She took the microphone from Clara's limp, trembling hand. Clara didn't resist. She seemed to have shrunk inside her own gown, a hollow shell of the triumphant bride she had been just moments before. Eva's voice, when she spoke, was not loud or angry. It was calm, measured, like a deep river that runs with immense, quiet power. "Thank you, Clara," she began, her words echoing across the estate and out to the millions watching online. "Thank you for keeping my brand alive these past few years." The politeness of the statement was more devastating than any accusation could have been. It re-established ownership, demoting Clara from visionary founder to temporary caretaker in a single sentence. "I didn't come here tonight to ruin your wedding," Eva continued, her hazel eyes sweeping over the sea of stunned faces. "I came to take back what should have never been stolen from me." The crowd was utterly still, their earlier scorn replaced by a mixture of shock, awe, and a dawning, sickening sense of their own complicity. They had mocked and tormented a giant, mistaking her for a mouse. The first domino to fall was the groom. Clara's fiancé, Julian Croft, heir to a shipping dynasty, rose from the head table. His face was a tight mask of fury and humiliation. He had not bought into a marriage, he had bought into the Alyss brand, into Clara's myth of the self-made woman. A myth that had just been publicly detonated. He crossed to Clara, his voice low, but audible in the dead silence, to the nearest guests, and, more importantly, to the nearest microphone. "You lied to me," he said, his words clipped and precise, about everything. He didn't wait for a reply. He reached for her hand, roughly pulled the enormous emerald engagement ring from her finger, and tossed it to the floor. It clattered on the marble with a sound that was both tiny and deafening. "We're done." And with that, he turned, walked off the stage, past the stunned crowd without a single glance, and disappeared into the manicured darkness of the estate. Clara's world was unraveling in real time. Her diamond veil slipped, askew on her head, as she staggered back. Her phone, left on the bridal table, began to buzz incessantly. Frantic texts from her board of directors, the very people who had helped her oust Eva, were flooding in. They were abandoning ship. Sponsors, who had paid millions to have their products featured at this wedding of the year, were already drafting press releases to distance themselves. The live stream, once her throne, had become her pillory. The camera zoomed in on her face, capturing the moment her perfect composure finally cracked, showing her mascara beginning to streak as tears of rage and despair welled in her eyes. The woman who had loudly cheered Clara's speech just minutes ago now muttered to her husband, "She's a fraud, an absolute fraud." Clara tried to speak, to defend herself, to salvage something from the wreckage. She reached for the mic, but it was dead. Asher's team had already cut the feed. The silence that met her was absolute, deafening. Her empire, built on Eva's brilliance and her own ruthlessness, had dissolved in the space of 5 minutes. Her name, which she had worked so hard to make synonymous with success, was now trending worldwide as a synonym for thief and liar. Across the lawn, Clara's inner circle, the co-conspirators, tried to make a quiet exit. Margot Reese, the chemist who had claimed Ava's formulas as her own, and Sloane Carter, the marketing guru who had rewritten Ava's story, attempted to slip away into the shadows. But there was no escape. The drones, now acting like metallic birds of prey, controlled by an unseen hand, followed them. Their panicked faces were splashed across screens worldwide, their careers, built on a foundation of stolen work, crumbling in real time. Eva stepped off the stage, Asher once again at her side, their hands linked. She didn't spare a single glance for the weeping, broken figure of Clara. She didn't need to. Her silence had spoken her truth, and it was louder and more resonant than any taunt or accusation she could have ever uttered. The crowd parted for them like the Red Sea, their whispers now a mixture of awe, regret, and profound shame. They looked at their own phones, seeing their earlier mocking comments and videos, and felt a cold dread. They had picked the wrong side, and the man holding the victor's hand was known for having a very, very long memory. The reckoning was swift and merciless. Before the night had even ended, the consequences began to cascade through the lives of those who had participated in Eva's humiliation. Justice in the modern age moved at the speed of the internet. Julian Croft's family, the powerful Croft dynasty, issued a public statement before midnight, formally announcing the end of the engagement and severing all personal and business ties with Clara and her ventures. Her self-made myth, the entire Clara Incorporated brand, collapsed like a house of cards. Social media, the beast she had so expertly manipulated, turned on her with feral viciousness. Memes of her stunned, tear-streaked face, captioned "Thief Bride" and "The Great Unfounder" went viral. The guests who had mocked Eva now faced their own public trials. Leah Hart, the tech heiress who had accused Eva of being there for the open bar, woke up to news that the primary investors in her new startup had pulled their funding, citing toxic optics and a lack of personal integrity after a clip of her taunts went viral. Derek, the hedge fund bro who had thrown the olive, found his company facing a sudden and thorough audit from regulators. A number of his largest clients, spooked by the public association with Clara's fraud and the hashtag number #DerekDown trending on financial news sites, pulled their assets. The influencer in the gold dress, whose video mocking Eva's thrift store vibes had been viewed millions of times, saw her world burn down overnight. The luxury brands she represented terminated her contracts one by one. Her follower count plummeted as a counter-campaign, number Fake Glam, gained momentum, her audience turning on her for her perceived cruelty. The guests who had laughed and thrown napkins scrambled to delete their posts, issuing panicked, insincere apologies that were screenshotted and ridiculed. Asher Dorian's network was vast, and association with him was a blessing, while being his enemy was a corporate death sentence. Their brands were quietly blacklisted, their invitations rescinded, their access to the world they cherished revoked. Margot and Sloane, Clara's chief allies in the coup, were formally removed from their board seats at Alice by morning. A press release from the new leadership announced a full review of the company's history, promising to restore the true founder's legacy. Their names were being erased from the company they helped steal, just as they had once erased Eva's. Eva's truth, quiet but relentless, had set their worlds on fire. And her grace, the very quality they had mistaken for weakness, had been the blade that cut the deepest. Asher and Eva paused at the edge of the terrace, the waiting helicopter a dark promise on the lawn. The chaos of the dissolving party was behind them, a distant, frantic hum. The air here was clean and cool. He looked at her, his stern features softened by the dim light from the estate. His voice, for the first time, held a note of vulnerability. "You didn't need to do this, you know," he said, his thumb gently stroking the back of her hand. "You didn't have to endure that. I would have just taken it back for you." Eva smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that reached her hazel eyes, making them catch the starlight. "I know you would have," she said softly, "but I did. I did need to do this. For me." She glanced back one last time at the glittering estate, a monument to a lie. She could just make out Clara's silhouette, a small, lonely figure still on the stage, abandoned under the magnificent chandeliers. Eva felt nothing, not pity, not triumph, just a quiet sense of closure. She had faced the monster not by becoming one herself, but by remaining who she was. She turned away from the ruins of Clara's life, her steps light on the stone, her simple silver ring glinting. They walked together across the lawn towards the waiting helicopter, their linked hands a silent promise. The night was theirs, the future was theirs, and the world they left behind was forever changed by the quiet, unshakable truth she had carried in her heart.